All right, hey, what's going on, guys? So now that you understand generally what my entire system looks like and the trades that go in line with my system, right? An EVC of basically 15-minute, 90-minute daily for the most part is what you basically saw examples of. I want to talk a little bit about foreshadowing, right? How do I look at markets? How do I decide what I'm going to watch? What am I going to wait for to set up? How do I look for things that might be in play? What am I looking for? Well, very simply, the answer to that, and the reason I want to go over this now because it kind of covers the portions of EVC we're talking about, is case studying. The same case studying that you've seen as examples in this portal already, the case studying that you saw me show you earlier, the case studying that I'm done and that you should be doing, those are the starting points of getting used to seeing something so that when the time arrives to trade things or when new names become available or assets become available and you look at an asset, you can decide for yourself in that moment if it's worth following it at that time or if it's worth waiting for a better setup for something to occur to take a trade. So for instance, on my list here, you can see I have a few things that says watch. I'll go over them right now. Now, I don't have full functionality yet, but by the time you're watching this down the line a little bit, there should be a section within the portal pertaining to the screener. The screener is something that our team has worked religiously on, so deeply on. We put a lot of money into the screener and then to a development team to making it all work, to making it function properly, to give you availability to all and many assets. It's part of what you get as being part of this team, and it's part of the software that you actually gain access to and can use and should make your journey as a trader more efficient, even though you do not need it to be profitable. Very important to remember that because part of what I do is I try to teach you to think for yourself and act for yourself so that you don't need to rely on anything. But there are ways to make your things much more efficient. And why wouldn't you use something that makes your life more efficient? But nonetheless, initially, I found these names because I was looking at these assets right here, because I was looking at the screener. The screener basically showed me a reason to look at something and add it. And now I can go over why I added it. So that's what's going to be covered here. And in the future, you will see in the portal us cover further screener-based material for how to use the screener to actually find more markets. So let's look at something like coin. This is something I'm keeping an eye on and want to trade. Okay, this is a trade that I didn't take. This is a trade that I'm not in, that I did not take. None of these were taken. Of course, these are all case studied and added just for the purpose of studying. But let me walk you through what I see when I look at coin and why I decide to add it to my list and why it's just here at the moment. So the first thing is if I'm starting with a weekly, so let's call this the C2, right? Because right now what we know is I have a 15-minute E, I have a 90-minute V, I have a daily C, and basically, as I've explained before to you guys, I have a weekly C2, right? This might be a reason for me to decide to even look at something. And the reason I do this as well is because as part of the screener, these are some things you can look for, right? Big moves above MAs can kickstart the clean moves across an EVC. That's why you have this added. So what I saw on this thing when I looked at it literally this week and why I added it is I saw price go through an accumulation MB buildup. Accumulation MBs led to a beautiful move higher. Well, even before that, at this point here, when this price made this candle here, that was basically accumulation MBs happening. This could be accumulation MB1, 2, or accumulation MB1. Accumulation MB2 is forming, which does what? It acts as a potential momentum MB1, which means that we are at the potential start of a cycle, maybe, on a much, much higher C2. So we know that if the daily and the 90-minute can begin to orient themselves towards the EVC, we should start seeing great moves out of this. So if I move to the daily now, I'll move to the daily on this chart right here on the right. If I move to the daily, what do I instantly see and what do my eyes go to? Well, the first thing I see is that initially, right, we had some kind of move here, started going through a major flush or whatever, had a major flush here, super major flush. And then from there, right, began to put in accumulation MBs. Those accumulation MBs, this is a great example because you kind of had like accumulation MB1, MB2, it came back down, accumulation MB1, accumulation MB2, and price started a beautiful move higher. And again, this is like an example where this is both a momentum MB, but also very hard to trade because of where it's happening in relation to the moving averages. But nonetheless, you had a crazy move higher, then price flushed out back under the 10 and 20, so it wasn't able to maintain its momentum MBs initially. And then what happened? It built up an MB1, accumulation MB1, no MB2, and took off. Now we know through this, there should be a buildup, very likely, of clear 90-minute based validation timeframes. So if I move lower and I look at this, right, what I saw at the time was, here you are, absolutely beautiful, through the creation of that momentum MB, of this accumulation MB of the higher, what we actually did is we made a move higher, and we kind of came down, we made a move higher, and this started the first, right there, momentum MB1, hence the label. So that's a 90-minute momentum MB1, then you kind of had this 2, then you maybe even had this 3 right here, kind of pre-market, that's that gray. Then you had this 4 or 3 start right here, and this could have been a trade that you could have taken this week, somewhere inside of here, right? This was kind of a third pause. But what's very cool is that if we look at the daily, this started a crazy move higher. So now this is clearly in momentum MB territory, and at the time that I was looking at this, price was actually back here. And you can see what I sent out to the team here and what I was expecting, or still expecting, and this is why it's added to my list. What I sent is this. I basically said, listen, guys, and again, I will show you all how to find these names through the screener, how to get used to looking for them, finding them for the timeframes you want to be using. We're going to go over all of that, and you have access to all that software, which is just amazing. But this is what I sent out at this point here, when price was right here. So let me go to the daily here and go to a 65-minute here. Okay, beautiful. Yes, perfect. And remember, the 65-minute is basically like a 90-minute. They're very closely correlated because there's only 5 hours in one trading day of a stock. So whether you break up that 5 hours into 65-minute intervals or 90-minute intervals, they're very similar. That's why I kind of use like this weird time frame approach, because I mainly trade a lot of stocks now, since there's much more availability there, right? And this is where I sent it out, right? I basically said, okay, I really want to see this hopefully go sideways for a bit, right? Maybe price will go sideways, 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 and that will start this 65-minute flush out, and that flush out will lead to accumulation MBs, which should lead to new opportunities and entries, as we know, in or around these areas here, to start the V of this time frame or lower to give you the 15-minute entries later in or around those areas for a move higher, right? This is exactly what I'm looking for on repeat. So that's when I sent it out. And now, right, price is just simply doing what? Well, price is just simply going higher, right? Now, does that mean that the entire idea is gone and broken? No, right? All it means, to put it very simply, is that, here we go. All it means, right, is that I'll be looking for a little bit something like this. Price will at some point start going sideways. That sideways should become a momentum MB, and that momentum MB should kickstart some potentially new accumulations, given that this market retains its strength, and I can get inside, I can get into it, and hopefully trade that thing higher, right? So now I have an understanding of what I want to look for if I am to trade this. If I go to a 90-minute, I'll do the 90-minute here, the daily here, right? If I go to the 90-minute here, this is just including the data here. So if you double click the candles, give me a second. Sorry, I had the family just come home, but yeah, if you just double click, what you'll see is there's an extended trading and a regular trading hours. So the extended will show the pre-market and aftermarket. The regular will show just regular. So if I go to like a 65-minute here, right, what you'll notice is you won't see all the gray areas. And that's because on the 65-minute, right, because it's 5 hours, it can provide opportunities for me. Like these, well, this one's not tradable because you can see it just gapped up. But that's basically why I use that. But don't worry about that too much. So again, on the 90-minute here, when you look at it, right, you have that kind of, right, this is not coin. There we go. They look similar because coin and GBTC are basically the same thing. It's like Bitcoin USD. It's like the same thing. But you have this 1 into 2 into 3 into like 4, and now you're almost on your 5th, right? So at that point, I am no longer really like super interested. Maybe you can make an argument that like this was 1, 2, maybe you could say this was 3, and this is now 4, right? Just like this. But either way, I'm no longer interested in necessarily taking trades on this because I truly believe it's extended, right? I want to see this kind of correction, this kind of pause before I trade this. So I know what that means is that the 90-minute is likely going to go into what? Flush outs that start creating what? New accumulation MBs, which become accumulation MB2s, which become the first momentum MBs that create opportunities on those 15 minutes and everything else, right? So this is how I orient myself in a market and decide which markets I'm going to start watching, keeping an eye on, or whatever it might be. Now, again, I know these are stocks. Don't get me wrong. Like I look at many, many stocks. I live in the US. The US stock market is available to me. It's actually available to everyone. There's many ways to get an international brokerage, and there's many international brokers. And we'll talk about that at some point. But they have the most opportunity because there's so many assets that make up many different things, which is great because the things that are moving the most can be the thing I watch. Same thing goes for crypto and altcoins. I can't wait to get a proper crypto account created for myself because I'll be able to trade the stuff that also looks very good and starts making very clear moves. Now, same thing goes for futures. I have access to futures. And FX. So here's an FX pair that I was, watching. This is GJ. If I show you guys this, if we look at the daily here, you have very similarly, right, kind of the same thing. Price started this move. It was a little bit choppy. It had a very nice move out of this, right? If you had been following this started a nice move higher. You kind of had this one, maybe two. This is all counts as two. And now you're getting this pause. So again, into next week, I'll continue to watch this thing for a move higher, right? You can see at this point, I was expecting it to start building accumulation MBs to give me entries. It never did that. But guess what? This is the beauty of having a trend template. And it's an understanding of how moves will build themselves up if there's going to be a move to start with, right? And then this price will then curl up, create that momentum MB. And these will start creating the entries along the 15 minutes that I can personally take higher. And then hopefully that delivers through momentum MBs higher here. Right. So again, this is how I basically orient myself in the market, in any market I look at. I look at stuff that's just been showing natural strength, that's been moving very, very nicely. We'll talk about all of this later. So strength across the board, what's showing up on the screener, how do we decide which ones we want to trade, which ones do we choose to trade and then stick to. So it's very important too. I like to stick to just a few things to really focus on instead of looking at absolutely everything at all times. So you'll see that, similar names will be the names I'm looking at with the addition of some here and there. Like I'll have 10 to 20 things that I'm looking at and I'll leave it there. And that's important to me because it keeps me locked in personally as well. That's more psychological. But yeah, this thing, when I look at it, I see a move that's very, very good. I see it's gone, but now I need to give it time to kind of reset and create a new move. So very simply, all I'm doing right now, to give you an example from more the left-hand side of the chart, is I'm waiting for this to happen right here. I assume right now that price is here or here in its delivery, and I simply want to see it go sideways a bit and then start a new move from down here, which will become what? This momentum MB will become the accumulation MBs of a lower time frame, which will become the momentum MBs of a lower time frame that will become the new accumulation MBs of an even lower time frame. And that will be the demand validation that gets me into a trade. And then I want to be there to sustain and be in most of this move higher until I get taken out of it because the momentum is lost, until I do it again and do it again until there's failure in the market, in which case I get out and I wait on the sidelines, right? That's what I'm expecting. That's what I look for. This is how you can right now, no matter what things you start looking at, no matter what your friends are trading, no matter what your friends are thinking about trading, no matter what you hear in YouTube videos or podcasts, when you hear the name of something or you see something for whatever reason, or you're looking at the screener, you have some you have some bearing and foundation as to what you can start to look for across your EVC to decide, is this thing worthwhile for keeping on my list right now? And if it is, what am I looking for to start executing and take a trade and take entries on this given thing? So this is what it looks like to basically have something on your list that you might be watching. That's one example. Roblox. This is another example of something I'm keeping an eye on. All right, sorry, I had to pause again. Had something go down with the fam. So spending a little bit of time with the family, but from what I remember, we were talking about Roblox in terms of why it's now hit my list, right? We started with Coin, I believe. Now we're on Roblox, and why am I keeping it on my list? What am I looking for? You are going to start seeing the same things repeated in terms of why I look for something, why something gets on my list. And then at the same time, when you guys show up to some of the webinars, when you start doing this for yourself, when you start using the screener to find things for yourself as well, you're going to notice the same repeated thing happen in price every single time. It's going to become so repetitive to you, right? Right now, it might not be. Right now, it might feel like, holy, like, what's he doing? Why is he doing this? That might be how it feels for some of you. But for instance, when I'm looking at something, when I'm doing it after I've done my analysis, once I have something open like this, right, it is very, very clear to me what I'm looking for, no matter what. So Roblox now, why is this on my list? Now, again, I have not taken a single trade on this thing yet. Let's start by looking at the daily, and we'll open the 65-minute on the right. So remember, I use the 65-minute as one way to potentially enter, but usually as a 65-minute creates a opportunity or an accumulation MB, I'm pretty much watching the 15-minute or 90-minute, 15-minute for entry and the 90-minute for that validation. Because again, the 65-minute and the 90-minute are pretty much identical in validation, but the reason I do the 90 is because, like I said, here I have access and I've added the pre-market stuff. And on the 65-minute, I don't add it because the 65-minute has 5 candles in a day for most stocks that I'm looking at, which means that I can use this to potentially get involved. So why did I add this to the list? What's going on? So if I start with the weekly, right? Sometimes I'll start with the weekly as my highest context, as my C2. And what you'll see here is that basically, this price has been kind of sideways for a very, very long time, And most recently, literally very recently, this thing kind of started to kind of push out up over all the MAs, went sideways the way I would normally want to see MAs go sideways, and since then has actually catapulted out of here. Now, in all honesty, personally, I did not trade anything back here, right? I even have this on my list. I didn't really know about it, but if you take a look, because we understand how prices work, this weekly validation cycle where you have a momentum MB forming now, right? And again, to use momentum MBs, I draw them with a line above or 2 lines, and usually I just use a very light gray because I don't like seeing too many lines on my chart. I just, this allows me to figure out where I am very quickly. Very easily when I look at the weekly, I can see these lines and I'm like, okay, I was looking at this as a potential validation MB or an overall MB that's occurring. Let me go back up to Roblox here. And if I go inside of this momentum MB on the lower time frame, what do you see? Well, you're going to see the same thing again. You have this very, very nice large push. You have a huge sell-off. This is a flush out. That flush out led to the creation of an accumulation MB, either here or this one, however you want to view it. And then you can even see here, right? So again, I can see the mark because, my eyes are tuned for what I'm looking for. So if I mark it, I remember that's why I marked it. So you can see it marked here. This is a momentum MB. You can also mark this one right here. Both of these kind of act as momentum MBs, but this one's a little bit harder to see just because it's just one big candle. So this is why this one's marked. And that's a momentum MB that's forming here. It's also an accumulation MB of the daily, right? So this was very beautiful. And I missed this trade inside of here. I'm going to be honest with all of you. I did not trade this thing whatsoever. It came on my list on this day because of huge volume and because it's made a very large move and it's shown overall strength. So as a result, it's now shown me that it's something I can watch. That's one of the reasons. But now what am I keeping an eye for? What am I looking for? You're going to see me looking for the same thing. So this momentum MB here, the one denoted by these 2 lines, this momentum MB, which, if I can just draw it for you, this momentum MB is the thing that kind of started this move. And if I go inside of that on a 65-minute, so now I'll go this one to a daily. So again, I'm remembering where I am cyclically. Right, this is a kind of a context time frame cycle. That's starting accumulation MBs to the top side, which created momentum MBs, and it then created another momentum MB. And as that happened, you can actually see it in gray here. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of breath. I just went for a run as well. I'm a little bit out of breath, but as that momentum MB began to get created on that daily, what you see on the 65-minute here is, once again, price flushes down below the 10 and just below the 20, so just to the 20. And from there creates an accumulation MB and another accumulation MB. And again, as we're here, you can already see the little drawings that I've added here, right? Because I know these are momentum MBs. So again, if I had to enter this on a 65-minute, the entry on this thing would have been literally through a buy stop of this high. And this would have been a phenomenal trade, one that I'd be more than happy to take. And in this case, it would now be one that's would be delivering and not break even. But again, I just did not take it. It was not taken. However, I began to keep an eye on it on the 90-minute. So let's go to the 90-minute really quick. And here we are, because again, remember the 90-minute, all I do for myself is I include the pre-market and post-market data as well. So I can actually see kind of what's going on, because this is not included, but it does create opportunities that might be clear for me to take on a 65-minute entry basis. But as this happens, I know at this point that a 90-minute is likely starting to create those validation MBs. So really, the way I want you to kind of witness this is treat the 90-minute and the 65-minute as the same time frame, because I'm using them both as like a V. Okay, that's ultimately what's happening. So if I know the 65-minute is in this accumulation MB buildup into momentum MBs, I know the 90 minutes likely doing the same thing. So what happened here on the 90? Well, take a look, right? You get that move, you get the flush out, in this case, down under the 1020, exactly what I look for. You get the buildup of an accumulation MB. The next double MB or accumulation MB in this case actually acts as a momentum MB, hence the lines you can see drawn. Those momentum MBs and the ones following should now lead to opportunities to the upside. Now, again, I added this to my list very, very late, so I did not take this. Please remember that. I did not take this, but nonetheless, beautiful. Comes in to that area, creates that double MB off the low, right? Beautiful buy stop either here or through this high or through this high here, just depending on how you wanna view this or how you wanna take it. I probably would have entered through this and maybe even taken a loss initially if I traded this. So it'd probably be my trade would probably look something like this. I would have gotten tapped in, no break even. It would have stopped me out, and then I would have re-entered through the MB1, MB2 right here, and I would have re-entered this, and I would still be in it now because these wicks during outside market hours do not affect me, right? So the way I think about it is I'm in this thing. If I show it this way, well, I would get stopped out of break even actually right here. And that would be the end of that trade. And maybe I'd get a partial out of this. Probably not though. Yeah, so this would not be, nothing would have happened here. However, even with that in mind, it's something that I'm now keeping an eye on because again, this is a move that has just started. So if I go to the daily and I put this onto the 90-minute, right? If I had to ask myself, what am I going to wait for? Well, if I look at this daily, I know the daily had just kind of begun, right? You had your kind of first momentum MB, maybe this is the second, and price is not extended in a very far way multiple times yet, right? So price hasn't yet created a crazy move again and then gone sideways a bit and like it's over. Instead, price has started to move. Now it's starting to go sideways, which is perfect. And what it's doing is it's building up the potential for another move. So like if I had to look for something, right, if I wanted to look for something, I know I'm in my like second momentum MB on the daily. So I know this is going to go through accumulation MBs or flush outs on the 90-minute or momentum MBs on the 90-minute, right? If this flushes out further, maybe like down here, it will create a 65-minute potential entry, right? So again, same thing again. If this flushes out like this, that will then create a 65. Here we go. On Roblox. This will then create a 65-minute clean flush out that will then lead to either an accumulation MB into an accumulation MB, which will become a momentum MB, or that might not happen. It'll just kind of start a move. And as it does that, once again, as that kind of starts, that would be this guy right here. As that begins, there we go. The 90-minute, here's the 90-minute in front of us. The 90-minute will also go into this flush out, which is what's happening right now, which is perfect. And that initial push will also act as a potential accumulation MB. And maybe the addition of the other data to this thing will allow for a momentum MB, which will then lead to a 15-minute accumulation MB, double MB entry into the momentum MBs that deliver that move. And lo and behold, that's what I'm managing. And that can either then fail and do nothing or go for a crazy move, give me a very nice initial partial. The rest can be left to go and then just stop out or go for a crazy move. And that's exactly how time and time again, over and over and over again, I use a repeatable process of EVC across the board, fractals, to not only go over the trades that I've already taken and take trades, but to also orient myself in any given market at any given time and decide how I'm going to participate in this market. So notice how the game that we're playing isn't a game of like, ooh, but what's going to happen next? It's more so a game of I know the things that I need the market to do for me to execute a trade. And it's just a question of the market undergoing those things or failing, right? And by that metric, by that walkthrough psychologically, what you're ultimately doing is once again, you're adding to your ability, you guys are going to get sick of seeing this, of knowing the composite operator or knowing where the composite operator wants to move the price. Because either the thing that you have been waiting for, that you know you need to wait for, that you know you're looking for, either that thing occurs and then occurs across fractals and then you can participate, or doesn't occur, in which case it either completely fails or just moves without you. And that's part of the game, and you move on to the next asset. And you look at a batch of 10 to 20 assets, you watch them well at one time, depending on the time frames you trade. But as you start to trade some hires, like 15-minute entries, 65-minute entries, you'll have a little batch of things that you watch, like a basket, and those will orient yourself in the market, and you will look for the opportunities over and over again. This is how why I added this thing, why I'm not keeping an eye on it. Now, again, this is just the EVC formula for why I added it, and we'll go over relative strength and stuff later. But this is exactly what I do, right? So again, I have a full understanding of what I'd want to see in this market if it is to create an opportunity for me. And I know what that's going to look like across the 65-minute. I know what that's going to look like across my 90-minute, which is the same thing. Remember, I know what it's going to look like across my context/validation time frame. I know what it's going to look like across my validation time frame. And then if in the event that occurs, because remember, I'm looking for something like this to occur, right? Let's forget all these. Let's just pretend that's not something I drew in, right? In the event that something like this occurs, here we go. which is what we want to see, then I know my opportunities are going to be somewhere around here, right? Like I just know that's how it's going to look. Or, it can flush out deeper, create a better like move, like whatever, maybe play around, then come up and maybe create an opportunity in or around these areas. Given that, as that occurs, right, the daily retains a move that is still clear in regards to the things that I personally tested and the way that it looks for me to continue trading an entry. Or if it becomes less clean, or if it becomes a very large fall off and it's super unclear, right? Maybe it becomes super unclear, then I simply walk away and wait, because then either the price fails and there's nothing left to do on this market, or it gets bought up, right? It gets rebought up, maybe goes sideways here and does the exact same thing for an entry later, or it keeps getting bought up, then goes sideways here for an entry later. And those momentum MBs now from the overall accumulation that's happening on this given market is going to set the precedent for my entry timeframes or validation timeframes to begin to be clean. And this is how I literally can sit back and be patient for the kind of moves that I want to be a participant of. And again, it's doing nothing more but putting to use EVC, the cycle of EVC, and the one major cycle, and using the important momentum cycle of the V and the C to actually position myself into a market. Now, maybe one more. I can maybe look at Reddit as well, see what's going on here. Yeah, so again, you can see this is something I missed. I added this late. This is just part of my case studying now. But this is another one of those examples that's like almost perfect. It's not perfect, but it's almost perfect. And the reason that I say it's almost perfect is because what we have here is a market that kind of started up down here, right? So it kind of went through 1, maybe 2, 2, maybe this is 3, this might be 4. So this is like maybe 5 or 4, right? So this could be the 4th or the 5th leg. So really like that makes it harder to trade, because again, when you get later into the legs, or you get later into the fractal stages, the odds of a move correcting heavily and actually creating a flush out that's then going to lead to a new move later that might be tradable, right, becomes a lot higher. Now, even though it can work out, this is why I kind of skipped on this one. It just, even though everything was going up at the time that this was all happening because of the election and stuff, don't worry about that too much, but that's why everything was like going fucking wild. I skipped it completely, right? Because again, we were kind of extended, and for what I normally want to see in my CNV, this gave me this basically said, hey, you probably shouldn't keep an eye on this right now. And even then, right, despite that, you can kind of see what happened here. This is actually a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. Finally, I found one. So the 65-minute created a an accumulation MB, and notice how it never created a second accumulation MB. Maybe this one, but it's just a secondary FFMB, and then this one happened way too high. So now we know this is very likely a momentum MB, and so notice how this would not have given me an opportunity to take, right? I don't really have a way to enter this. So what's cool is on the 90-minute, what you're likely going to see, okay, even here it was very hard, but what you're sometimes going to see is a 90-minute might have put in a little bit of sideways here that would have led to a move like this, right? The 90-minute might have put in some sideways here, which it did, for me to get a trade going. Because again, I'm not going to buy stop a 65-minute here, but on the 90-minute, when we come out of this accumulation MB and then we create a momentum MB kind of 1, then we go into this 1/2, but basically 1. As that happens, right, that sets a precedent for a potential move. So now what's happening is you have this 1, maybe this is like 2 right here, right? So you have momentum MBs that are now going to act as potential entries on the 15-minute as my entry time frame. And if you take a look, right, well, in this case, I don't really see anything. You have kind of the accumulation MB1, and then price just kind of runs. Very hard to trade this thing, so I probably wouldn't have done anything there. And then again, you have like a MB1, kind of MB2. I probably would have traded this and either taken a break even or a loss. So again, there's no real prediction exactly how it might have gone, but just looking at this, I probably would have ended up taking a break even with that strength. But this could have also just been a loss. And then you had the flush into MB1, MB2, and this was just perfection, right? This is another one of those examples where, just like that, this is another one of those examples where this thing just kind of went, and it was really, really nice, right? And this would have been a great trade for anyone that maybe participated in it, right? But again, I skipped out on these just because of what kind of the daily was doing, right? This thing not only, like if this was the first move that happened, I would have likely traded this, but because this has happened and it had so many moves already, and now it's speeding up, it leads me to believe that this could be an extension. Even then, take a look, right? even when I believe something to be true, I can be wrong and I can miss out on opportunities like this, which is what happened here, right? And then theoretically, you can make the argument that the 90-minute, because of the reset here, the flush here, you have a new leg. So basically, this thing has the ability to go kind of like 1, maybe this is 2, maybe it pauses again for 3, maybe 1 more for 4, and then it becomes truly extended and fails down, right? That can easily happen. Don't get me wrong. This can easily go for another little move and then fail. But what you're doing as a trader is you're trying to align the cleanest potential trades that make the most sense to you, right? And you do that through, again, a lot of case studying and seeing this thing happen over and over and over again, and seeing it happen on the screener, and then having a number of things that you're watching at one point and seeing, like even like I'm doing right now, seeing for yourself how the thing delivers so that you get better at understanding how the next thing that's going to deliver might be able to do it. And then you get positioned behind it, you take on the risk, you manage your risk, you manage it well, you get rewarded for really good runners, and you simply take small losses, or you take no loss with managing to break even on the things that don't do well. That is the key and the power behind fractals, EVCs, and utilizing them with the momentum MBs and accumulation MBs. And now that we've done all that, I think it's actually time that we can talk more about moving averages, because you literally know everything you need to know about them. Remember that. You literally know everything you need to know about them. The only thing you don't know is like, why are we using these averages? What are they? What's the idea behind them? We'll tell you about the idea, and then we'll look at more technical based things around them in terms of like what you might end up looking. But again, all these examples are examples of stuff that I'm personally watching or that I've personally traded, and the exact reasons as to why. And you will see more of this in the webinars as well, of course, as I go through trades that I personally take and everything else that comes with that, right? And there we have it. See you guys all in the next one. Thank you.